The problem of closing civic space, the fact that governments all around the world in the last 10 years have been really trying quite hard to close down or limit the activities of liberal and human rights type, democratic type NGOs and civil society organizations. It's a big problem, and donors and other international actors everywhere are scrambling a little bit to find out how to respond. Some work we've done suggests that there are 4 basic areas in which donors have been responding. One is in the area of operational changes, by finding different ways of funding NGOs, by helping them with emergency needs when governments have imprisoned activists or whatever. Another one is in the area of trying to build NGO and civil society capacity to fight back, to act collectively to resist these sorts of moves. A third area is, and this is a little bit more limited in how much has gone on in this, is in collecting evidence, monitoring the activities. So the funding to Civicus, to produce a Civicus monitor, has been very important in tracking these sorts of activities. Also to the work that the International Centre for Nonprofit Law has done on this. Really the area which is probably most important and which has been least enacted on so far is in the politics and the more kind of coordinated policy level of activity. These are political drivers that are causing civic space to close. And unless there is a kind of coordinated international level effort to push back against these changes in developing countries in particular, it's not going to have much of an impact. From the work that we have done looking at what has been happening, and to some extent also at how different actors are responding, there are several things that we think really need to happen. And the first one, I think, is for international donors, is to recognize that these are dynamic situations, and to recognize also that these are both national political drivers, national political processes of change. These are about political elites taking power, essentially, from civil society actors. But it's also that these are set within quite global processes of change. And so the fact that, for instance, China has risen as an important development actor is really changing the normative environment within which civil society can operate in developing countries, also in developed countries as too. This is not something that's just happening in the global south, it's happening everywhere. So the first thing is to recognize these dynamic situations, to recognize these are political changes, and to think and work politically in the way we design responses. If we understand that these things play out differently in different kinds of political settlements, we should be able to develop strategies that are tailored towards the different kinds of political settlements. So, for instance, where you have a generally democratic system, a country that has quite strong democratic institutions, we would say, for instance, Brazil has currently quite strong democratic institutions, being squeezed very, very hard by a new right-wing government. Nevertheless, civil society is still strong, it's still vibrant, there is still a free media, and this is not the time to be holding back on the values of civic space. This is the time to be pushing forward and making strong claims. I think we also have to think about the global political forces involved here, and to recognize that the role of China in development has changed significantly. We're not where we were 25 years ago, where the global north was setting all the norms about development. China's having a big impact here. But from the point of view of the northern development institutions, we don't really have much sense of how civic space is being thought about in Chinese development circles, or what the Chinese political policy elite think should be happening with civil society in Africa, Latin America, and other countries in Asia. These are things we need to understand. I think for international donors, a really important aspect is to make much more coordinated efforts at both national and global levels. I think the evidence suggests that sometimes donors have not been coordinating. Well, in fact, in general, donors have not been coordinating in pushing back on these issues. And in fact, sometimes they've even been competing with each other for space in countries, trying to protect their favorite organizations. And sometimes countries have even been competing internally over their relationships with governments and not wanting to annoy governments by pushing back on human rights or civic space where it suits one part of the government as opposed to the other. So these are really critical, constraints to coordinated action. Another really important thing is that there is a whole new narrative about development, which is about Asian values and about the fact that we can have, roads and food security and so on, and that's human rights too. Those are human rights. Economic and social rights are very important, but actually these rights of freedom of association, of freedom of speech, of the right to organize NGOs and do advocacy on behalf of marginalized people, also very important. But the narrative has been weakened in the last few years, certainly the last decade, and there needs to be a stronger evidence base and a stronger narrative to explain why, in fact, civic space is so crucial for inclusive growth and development and for the achievement of the SDGs.